awakening to universal knowledge and consciousness through uplifting interviews and soul-stirring conversations to help you realize the divine power, force, and energy inside of you, your Sacred Valley. Expand your mind and free your spirit with Sacred Valley Podcast. Hi there. Welcome to Sacred Valley. My name is Tara Crete. I am your host. Just before we begin, I just want to give a little disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed on Sacred Valley Podcast are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the position of the host of Sacred Valley Podcast. Any content provided by our guests are of their opinion and not intended to malign anyone or anything. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to be bringing on a very special guest. Her name is Meghan Walsh. I think a lot of you are familiar with her dad, John Walsh. He has... We mostly know him from the story his son died tragically at 6 years old. So I'm going to let Meghan tell that story, but we have a deeper story to talk about today, and that's why Meghan is on. So Meghan, I want to welcome you to Sacred Valley. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tara, for having me. Good morning, everybody.
Oh, good morning. So you're living in Vero, and that's so interesting because that's where I used to live, and that's like a connection that you and I have. How long have you lived there?
Well, I grew up here. We moved here when I was, very young, a couple years after Adam, was taken, my brother Adam, from Hollywood, Florida. We moved up here, and I've been here ever since. I went to school outside, out of state, and I lived in India for several years and all over. But, I came back here with my kids and to be by my family.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit about I want to know, tell our viewers anyway about, who you are with your dad. Like I was saying to you backstage, we know who your dad is. Unfortunately, we know who your brother is. Luckily now I know you, and now I'm going to know your story, and more of us are going to know your story, but just give us a little background there so the viewers know who you are.
I'm the only daughter of John and Meghan Walsh. I was born not even a year after my brother Adam was abducted or disappeared out of the Sears Mall in Hollywood, Florida, in 1981. I was born in 82 into all of it. My parents were starting to get involved with legislation and developing what is now known as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It began as the Adam Walsh Foundation. So I was really born into this, and they have pictures of me in strollers with politicians' bumper stickers around me, and everyone can Google and see the images at the White House and with Reagan and around all of these people ever since I was essentially born. I'm in the Rose Garden as a baby with Reagan and things like that. So growing up in that, there was that side, but then there was also the side of what my father went into afterwards, which was America's Most Wanted, and hunting criminals, if you will. And that has a whole experience in itself as being a child, involved in it and in those environments and stuff. So, there are aspects of that are deeper, and the trauma and the fear that's always around. We had bodyguards, aliases, followed everywhere, and grew up in Vero because it was quiet and safe. My dad would travel every week so that we could be here, and no one really knew. Again, we would tell people we lived in Washington, D.C. And, that's interesting as a child to have to do those things and go through that. So, it's always been this, about John and Meghan Walsh and Adam. And, we never really, I have two younger brothers. My brother Callahan is now the current co-host with my father on In Pursuit. He's about 2.5 years younger than me. And then 12 years younger than me is Hayden. He's 27, and he lives in New York, and just recently started getting involved with the industry as well, and in my dad's work. So, growing up was very interesting. I came back, like I said, to have my children, and to be around my family and in this small town. But when I started coming back, being John Walsh's daughter, I think people naturally felt that they wanted to come to me and tell me about, issues within the community, and different things that I started asking my parents about, or my dad specifically. And I also started looking into my brother Adam's case, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I have been an advocate for family court and CPS anti-corruption prior to the current situation that we'll get to with my family.
Right.
And so, I think that was really stirring the pot, and I didn't realize that. I thought that it would be in a crime fighting family and all of this, that, I would actually be something, appreciated or respected.
Was
And
this recently, Megan? Was this recently that you started asking questions and you started to think about, gee, what happened? Really, what happened to Adam back then?
Yeah, I started about 2.5 years ago, finally at, 36, 37 years old. I'm like, I'm going to look at these case files. I'm going to look at my brother's story, and not just from the perspective of the narrative that we've been given as the public. That's what I grew up with, was the same story narrative that everyone else has had. And no one questions it. That's valid. No one does. You see all the work that they've done. And anything I say here, I really do honor my mother and father. It's not to take away from any of the work, the good work that they've done, but we do have to address, the issues and the truths that might not be so great there. And that is there, there are those questions, there are those potentials that we'll get into, dealing with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and just how we're protecting children in America, especially since my brother's abduction.
There has been a lot of information that has been coming out, during this great awakening that people are calling this, what's going on in the world. That's what I call it right now. There's been so much truth coming out. And one of them is, the realization that, Child Protective Services is nothing like what they say that it is. And that's really disheartening. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know the truth about anything. So I'm just here as like a neutral voice, but I have heard a lot of that. And what you're saying is pretty much what we've been hearing. So you have a personal story though, because you have 3 children under the age of 9, I believe. And yours, and also just for clarity, you are estranged from your mom and dad right now.
Absolutely.
You were absolutely estranged. Yeah. Okay. And so tell us a little bit about what's going on with your kids.
Well, like I said, about 2.5 years ago, I started, looking into stuff as well as speaking up. They have, since I was young, which is another thing we hear in different elite families or Hollywood families, if you will, whatever term we want to use, this kind of an issue of really like kind of shopping around one of the family members or saying that they have a mental illness, things like that. Since I was 8, my parents started taking me to therapists and, shopping me around, trying to say, oh, her and her mother don't get along. And, now being a mother, I know when you have small children, that's usually a pre-existing issue with, the parent or the adult in the situation, not really the child. Children aren't really born, against their parents and things like that, or being combative. And I always was, really everything that my parents needed me to be. I was there at all the events. I was the small child. We were very quiet. We were raised to be people pleasers. But, I started speaking up. I was also seeing therapists. I'm a certified advanced intuitive healer. So from them doing all of that from a young age, I took what was good from it, right? I tried to find the good in these experiences and really learn and heal, and, emotional healing and things like that really became a big thing for me. I loved it. I love helping people. I love being able to show people that our hardships can truly be like life directors in a way.
Absolutely.
We can really help each other that way. And that's how we're all unique, and how there's no competition. If we just stick with that kind of stuff, then we can really, come together in the right way and be there for each other through our experiences and our hardships. And that brings in empathy and, just this connection as a humanity. So
it sounds like you learned a lot down that path. And I totally agree with you, because a lot of guests that I have on Sacred Valley, we talk about the valleys, the deep, dark, scary parts of our life, the not so fun parts. And that's where we glean the most wisdom and the most happiness once we come out of it. And, to your parents' defense, I don't know any parent that has raised their children without giving them issues. So some more than others, right? Every parent, you can be the best parent in the world, but your child is going to have some kind of issue. We live on planet Earth. That's what this planet is about. You don't come here for all puppy dogs and rainbows. That's part of it. But there's some lifetimes like yours. This one's tough, and you're in a valley right now. So just wanted to let you know that, because I have never met any child who says I have the most perfect family. No. My parents were perfect. There's no such thing.
There isn't. And, there's different degrees to that. Some of it is obviously by nature. And then some of it is a lack of, a trauma from the parents that was not addressed in themselves. And as adults, that's our responsibility at a certain point,
Right.
So, yes, there's definitely degrees of it. And there's, again, no situation is alike. We are all unique. And that's kind of what brings, an issue that is brought into CPS and family court, because we're talking about a system when these are very unique, very nuanced, very sacred and sensitive situations, and no family or child situation is going to be alike. And so, yes, absolutely. We have to look at each individual situation and really see what that is, because there are, no one's going to come out perfect, like you said, and children are going to learn different things, and that's what makes you stronger, or in areas that you learn from or can use later in your life. So again,
Correct.
that's a great thing.
Yeah. You have a good perspective is what it sounds. You have a healthy perspective. I can tell that you've done some healing, because I've done a lot of healing and I recognize a lot of the things that you're talking about. So that's great.
Thank you. It's actually refreshing that these types of discussions and arenas are coming forward, honestly, to be able to talk about it and
Right.
to
It is.
really
It's time
have
for
it.
voices to be heard, and for us to talk about our valleys, because then, we can help you hopefully take a little bit of it every time you talk to somebody. That's always a nice thing. So
Absolutely.
as I understand it now, so you're, because of the digging that you did,
Mhm.
obviously your parents weren't crazy about that. It had the opposite effect that you thought it would have, which makes
Mhm.
sense to me. That's very intuitive. I would think that my
Mhm.
parents would want me to know more about it and dig, or maybe even perhaps find something out that they don't know.
Didn't
That
know.
could be exciting. Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's not how they reacted.
Tara, that was not the case at all. And I did go in full heartedly thinking that, I can be a part of this. That would be something that would be amazing. What closure, all of this, or maybe just a different aspect, especially because when we do look back at my brother's case, there is a lot of controversy. Like, we were given this very strong narrative, which is another thing that we're seeing in society today, is mainstream media and influence and entertainment and things, pop culture, if you will, the influence that they have on us, and how narrative versus truth, that's a huge theme for me. Narrative versus truth, whether it's in real life or within the court system, judicial system, that's really a big theme and a big topic that we're seeing. How we are given these narratives, and the whole, here's a beautiful little boy with a baseball bat, and this horrific incident that happened when it wasn't really expected around that time. This wasn't, supposedly a regular thing or a normal thing to happen. And it really had an emotional effect on, the nation.
I would say the world.
The world. Thank you.
Definitely the nation, because I think everyone knows who Adam Walsh is, and I can picture that. He had a baseball cap on, he had little freckles. I know the picture you're talking about, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
big
Mm-hmm.
influence.
And in that, I mean, that's amazing in one respect, but in another respect, it made it so that no one questioned anything. No one really, and that's the thing, with by nature, that we're given an issue or a narrative or a perspective of an issue, and we don't really, as the masses, really go before that. Sometimes, we see, like, okay, the boy was abducted, these parents are in trauma, they're making sure it's not in vain, they're doing this great work, like, we don't need to look more into this. And when I started looking more into the documents, the case files, a lot of really bad stuff came out, and there were a lot of discrepancies, a lot of room for corruption or mishandling of the situation or evidence or any of that. So, to keep it short, I mean, people, please, I want everyone to research anything I say. I want them to look for themselves. It's all out there. I'm not getting on here to gripe about my parents. It's about researching, and these things were laid out in front of us. It's all right there. I want the public to look and form their own opinion, and really be able to come together on this, because it is for what's good. I'm not out after somebody. It's just these are issues that are presented. We're in a valley for a reason. There's a bigger plan here. And if we can really turn this for good and really bring truth through grace to this issue of CPS, family court, and our children in general, I really do see that we can have a profound impact and really address the roots of our society and our future. So
I
it's
agree with
important to
all
me.
of that. I think you're spot on. And I'm a big proponent of research. Don't believe anything I say, right? Go
Mhm,
out and
mhm,
fact check yourself. You're
mhm,
right. We do live in a time right now where narrative is very opaque, and it's the one thing that people hear one thing, and we even read a headline now, and we immediately process it as oh, that happened and it's truth, without even opening up an article. And I'm guilty of that. I've done that
mhm,
before. I'm
mhm.
learning now to realize no. And even if you read the whole article, that doesn't mean that's the truth either, because that's one person's narrative or one person's truth. So the question is for you. I understand what you're saying, narrative and truth, but what is your truth right now? What are you going through?
My truth is that my own family has absolutely done everything to, I mean, they've taken my home, they've taken my children, I've had to, sell my car for attorney. And this is really something that we see in a whistle blowing. I hate these kitschy terms, but for point's sake, in a whistle blowing, or when someone's coming out speaking about things that, on a broader spectrum, certain people don't want talked about or brought out. So for me, my current situation is trauma. I mean, my children have been in an ambush situation involving the local sheriff, CPS, the courts. I mean, this has been 9 months of continuous daily trauma and harassment in one way or another. And they definitely planned this beforehand. They have all the characters involved and each of their parts between lawyers and, as I said, the different agencies. Um, and just to really see how the system, I mean, I'm kind of grateful. It sounds very weird, but because I was already advocating for this, like you had mentioned in the beginning, we hear these different things, and we hear facts and stuff, and obviously I was not okay with the statistics and the situations that I was hearing regarding CPS and our family court system, but I really truly did not know the depths of what CPS is doing and how it's truly just traumatizing our children and tearing families apart in many ways. I know
Right.
that there's a lot of people that go into it with great intention, and that's a big part of my message. I'm not here to attack anybody or bust anybody up. It's just we have an issue that affects a nation and a globe, and we need to address it because the system is not working. It's incentivized and it's not working the way it should.
Were your children, so you have 3 children under the age of 9. They were taken away from you how many months ago?
In April.
In April. Under the guise of what? What is the reason for that?
My father told the judge in emergency hearing that, Your Honor, she's holding those children hostage in that house. We have to get them out. It's a long story, but they used family court to begin with. They approached the father of my daughter, who I actually did have an agreement with. We didn't have paperwork and all of that because I had known his family all growing up. But 9 years ago, 10 years ago, when I had my child, I was in fashion and at a different point in my life and brought up in the industry, and working and traveling and all of this was what mattered to me. And I wanted to have donors with, children with donors, excuse me, at the time. So I did approach an old, acquaintance or whatnot, and asked him if he would, help me do this. And he agreed. It was verbal. And then, of course, neither of our families, our parents generationally did not like that. But we managed it. We didn't hear from him for 9 years. He lives in the same town, all of that. So my parents went to him behind our back. They cut a piece of my daughter's hair without our knowledge or consent, my consent or knowledge. Used a informational DNA test, which you're not supposed to use in court, to start a family court case. And in that, they put a ton of insane, literally insane allegations against me. It's actually quite comical. It's public record. Again, I invite anyone to please go look it up. I'm not hiding anything. It's quite wild to see how they do it. Actually, I hope people do. But they came up with a lot of allegations saying that I had, again, severe untreated mental illness, and that I was psychologically abusing my children, which is a huge loophole for CPS these days. As we find out, it's not personal to me. It's a huge loophole. So that was their original claim. We had a 5-day trial or 4-day trial where my father actually had me falsely arrested the day before the trial, and tried to have me spend the night in jail the day before my children's trial, and have to arrive in handcuffs and a jumpsuit. But I bailed
Okay, so
myself.
they're trying to make you. It sounds like it's a much deeper and much more profound version of, oh, they're just a conspiracy theorist. Because as soon as you attach that moniker to someone, people just go, oh, okay, well, we're just going to discount what she's saying.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if they're claiming that you're an unfit mother, if you're mentally unstable, all of those things sound really good in a court of law, I would think, especially your family's influence. I'm imagining they're pretty powerful people in your town.
My dad runs this town. I'm realizing and seeing a lot of people are. And yeah, that was another wild thing to see in just energy and influence on people being in the courtroom and with these different agencies, and just seeing the even nonverbal effects that he has on people. I mean, they just don't even question it, and they eat it up, actually.
Your microphone, I don't know what's happening. I'm not sure. It's going a little tinny, but let's see. There we are. That's a little better.
Is that better?
Yeah, it cuts out a little bit, but we can still hear you. I didn't know if anything changed on your end.
It might be covered. Is that, I lifted it up a little bit.
No, it's still a little bit tinny, but like I said, we can hear you, but you just sound really distant. Maybe it's just something on my end. Who knows? Hopefully, like so you were praising me at how good I was at technology. Now you're saying not so much.
It's much more than I'm like a mom and natural healer, and now I'm in this world of speaking out and technology. So here we go.
I hear you. So okay, so you no longer have your kids for now, and you're in a fight. It sounds like you're in the throes of it. And how do you see this ending? Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Are you going to get your kids back?
Well, I mean, I do believe that I'm going to get my kids back. I don't believe that they will be able to get away with this. Their ultimate goal is, and this is a big issue in our country, and especially in Florida, is guardianship and conservatorship fraud. We are seeing this a lot with, people will be familiar with Britney Spears and her case of conservatorship. And this is really what they do. It's really like a protocol, and you can see it with her. They start, defaming your character. They start picking that apart. They go after your children to get you to try to comply. That's really what's happening now, is this is retaliation to try to not only commit conservatorship fraud eventually to keep me quiet, and also be able to access money. So creative accounting comes into this, which then we'll talk about in a minute with National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There seems to be a theme there, but when you have conservatorship, you have control over what the person can say, the medical decisions, and also my children, and access to finances. So without getting too into it, and I hope people don't think that I'm skipping around too much. It's just there's a lot of information, and also it is legalities as well, and also wanting to respect my parents. But and if anyone has any questions, please reach out to me. I'm definitely here to talk about things, but in these interviews, I'd like to just kind of touch on stuff that people can start kind of researching and delve into, if they'd like to or not.
So can I ask you a question? So is Child Protective Services involved with this case with your kids and your parents?
Yes, the judge from the family court case called immediately DCF in the first 2 minutes of our first hearing, and which she actually ended up ruling was not an emergency by the end, but she called DCF to listen in on the hearing without knowing anything about the case. And then immediately DCF took over. My children became wards of the state, which John Walsh has no problem with my children being wards of the state. These were adult issues that we need to handle, not use my children and traumatize them and, in this way. So CPS, yes, got involved, came in, took my children, gave them to my parents, and now are, as we'll get into the system and how they do it, they will add services, they'll come up with things. I actually have a medicinal card for marijuana use for cancer treatment on my nose. As you'll see, I have basal cell carcinoma, and I'm using Rick Simpson oil to treat it naturally. And that in court was used they put it in a substance abuse context. So why I say that is because they take the realities and they put it in their narrative. And it was very disheartening in the courtroom. I think a big point here is that in the courtroom, again, narrative versus truth. These are judges. This is, CPS lawyers who none of them have seen the situation. None of them know the realities of it. There was no investigation for my children, which is required by law. There was no investigation for my case. They falsify reports. I mean, everything that we hear about going on in that has literally happened in my case.
They didn't come in and interview your kids or take them to a different room and say, and because there's ways that they can find out. They have therapists that are very well trained. They can find out if the child is being abused, if they're being neglected, and they're pretty good at it usually. So you're saying that never happened. That protocol.
Well, and that's the thing, Tara, is that I think that the masses that don't ever have to deal with this have a narrative impression of what CPS is and what they do. I actually asked CPS if they had a trained child psychologist on staff, and because I saw that throughout this process, there was no real consideration for the perspective of my children, my small children, looking up at this whole situation and being put through this whole situation. There was no effort to, Family First Act to keep them in the home, to offer in-home services before removing them. We do know that, immediate removal from a primary caregiver for a child actually causes certain aspects and percentages of brain damage and long-term trauma. So these people are saying that they're trying to prevent adverse events from happening that can cause issues for children, further down the road, when they're actually the ones creating a lot of these adverse events that will, affect these children later down the line. And that's not even getting into the foster care system. I mean, it's foster prisons, and this whole system is heavily incentivized. If they can get a diagnosis on a child, or if there's some kind of handicap, then they get more money for the child. And again, these are services. When you're taking these children to different locations, and usually they're private, it starts as a government agency, and then the agencies that handle after the removals are all private agencies, and they're all profiting in some way from the services. And, they'll tell parents that you're doing really well, it's almost over. And like they did to me the day before my hearing, they came up with services they ordered me to a 12-week substance abuse outpatient program for my medicinal use, my prescription, which the other day, then they called and said, oh, we decided to take that off of your case plan because you haven't had any bad drug test. You're not a drug addict, obviously. All that. But my point there, going back, is that they added that the day before a judicial review so that when we went into court, they could tell the judge that I was non-compliant.
My goodness. Okay. So what you're saying is they just came right in, they extricated your kids, which I can only imagine at any age that can be very traumatic for your children. So we'll say a prayer for them. Yeah. But I want to say something, because and I forgot about this until we started talking. I used to live in Sebastian for many, many years, and Vero subsequently. But last winter in February, I spent the whole month on Indian River Drive. And I went to a little wine bar in Sebastian. And I was by myself. I wasn't going to I went in to have to order takeout, and I was waiting for it. So I had a glass of wine. And I met a woman sitting next to me, and we just struck up a conversation. She was probably 36, 38. And she worked for CPS. And I was fascinated because I've been researching and hearing about all these things. And I was like, wow, I hear a lot of these things about your organization, and are they true? And she told me the story, which is really anathema to what you're saying. She said, oh, right now I have a case that I'm working on. There's a young boy, and he's been sexually abused by his father. And right now he's back in the father's house. Like the father just got out of jail, and now the son is back with the father. And I just looked at her, And I was appalled. I was speechless. And she was just, there was no affect. Her eyes were dead. I was like, how do you do this? How do you do this on an everyday basis? So, I mean, this man raped his son and he still has him. Yet what you're saying is they're accusing you of something so egregious and so awful, and your kids are, inherently in danger, is what they're saying, and they extricated them, and now you haven't had them for 8 months. So there's a dichotomy there. There's something that doesn't make sense.
Well, and that's what we're finding. Actually, you're absolutely right. Is sadly, again, everyone wants to shoot messengers, but we're actually having the courage to speak up and really talk about this. The issue that they are taking children from protective parents. We're labeled protective parents, and that's all twisted, and they use that. That's another time. But they are taking children from protective parents and they're handing them to abusers. I mean, even in my situation, I didn't really talk about this, but on Thanksgiving last year, my parents assaulted me with my children there on their private property, and they tried to film it to frame me. And I said, this, I do not consent and everything. And I tried to take the camera the phone from my mother's hand. I said, this is family. We don't do this. What's going on? And when I went to get the phone, because my children are there and everything, and this has been about an hour and a half of berating me around the property, saying, holding my daughter hostage, saying, if you leave her, you can leave with the 2 boys. And I said, no, these are my children. I'm going home. And just saying this script of, Meghan, you need help. Meghan, your children are terrified of you, blah, 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 to set this whole thing up. And then they said in court that I assaulted them on Thanksgiving, when actually, in fact, I have the recording. I have the pictures of my mother yanking my hair with my baby in my arms, bloodying my nose with her nails, and actually biting me during the assault on the arm. So from then on, I did start, and that's when I had been speaking up about the abuse. I had a therapist for, over a year and a half or 2 years, a wonderful woman that actually had to stop seeing my parents because of the emotional irregulations and the tirades that my dad would do. And they wanted to just call when they, didn't like something I was saying or doing and have me fixed, that kind of a thing. So she actually had to stop seeing them. And continued to see me, and we were speaking up and trying to get my life away from the dependence on them that I had, and they didn't like that, and they started to panic, and I actually was keeping my children and I from them, is my point. After that Thanksgiving incident, I couldn't call the sheriff because my dad's buddies with him, and all that, which is a horrible thing. Also, I should be able to go to my sheriff about this situation and feel protected, not threatened.
It's a shame that you have to take such drastic measures with your own family, but it happens. You're not alone in that respect. But prior to you delving into your brother's murder a few years ago, were there ever any incidents like this? Was this something that was spilled over from prior, or is this something that happened solely when you started doing all this research and uncovering different things?
Well, the abuse and stuff, the narcissistic abuse or coercive control, if you will, whether you're in mental health or the courtroom, those are the 2 different terms. That was really happening since I was young. And again, with abused children and things, you've grown up in that environment. You don't know different, when you start going to friends' houses and stuff and seeing how, normal people live, if you will. And you're like, wow, these things aren't so big and traumatizing and dramatic. And, life is simple and good. This is a different way. So, and also having therapists, they were taking me a therapist for their own benefit, but really it was kind of backfiring on them because I was being told, they were told too, you're not, your daughter's not the scapegoat. This is a family issue. You need to address this. This is from your traumas, different things like that. And when I was growing, as I got older and went through my own healing, my own certification, my own trainings, different things, I started to realize, that this was wrong, and, waking up, if you will, to what I had been through in my past. And I was made to think that, we should be so grateful. This is part of the family. This is what you do when you're born into this kind of family. And that's really not the case. My mother is very much a covert narcissist, and has always always abused me, would chase me through the house. I grew up a lot in my closet to feel safe, and
Literally in your closet.
literally, I mean, I had
Yeah.
drawings on the walls, and it was the only place that I could go there was a little dresser that I could pull out drawers, and it would keep the door closed only this much. And she would chase me through the house, and her face barking at me through the door is an image from my youth that I'll never forget. But, again, it's this public persona versus private life. And my dad really enabled it. He has his own forms of abuse. And, I was really treated almost like a mistress in my family, by my mom and dad. And that was a big thing I was speaking up about as well.
Wow. I'm so sorry to hear all that. It's always hard to hear when someone has, childhood trauma. I don't know a lot of people who don't have some form of it. Like I said, yours is extreme for sure. Can I ask you, this is like a personal question, but I'm just wondering, I believe that my soul chose this lifetime. I believe that I chose to be here for what's going on in this world. I think there's no more exciting time right now. You've got so much going on personally, but when I take a look at the broader scope, our whole world is changing, and your life is changing within that world. It's kind of a microcosm of the macrocosm. Do you subscribe to that? Do you feel like there's some part of you that's like, no, I signed up for this at some point, so I know I have the tools and the strength to get through this?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Tara. And that's what actually keeps me going every day. And the strength is because, and I say this very humbly with almost getting choked up. Since I was little, I always just asked God for my purpose. What is my purpose? What is my purpose? I remember being a little girl.
I just got goosebumps on my whole body. So those are what I call those are truth bumps. Like, when you hear universal truth, they're all over my body.
We call them validation shows.
Yes.
Yeah,
oh my God. It's like rippling. Okay.
And I would, I mean, just very innocently. And that's how I got in so many directions in my life, and different was, what is my purpose and what is the truth of God? I don't have to prescribe to one thing or what I've been told since I was young. I want to find this out on my own. So, those were really two big things for me throughout my life. And yes, I do. When I got those first papers served, and when it was this big dramatic ambush with no marked police cars and all of this, and I saw these crazy allegations and everything, I said, I have to be sure this is clearly bigger than me. This is not about me. And if I can really bring exposure, I say this with such, depth in my heart. If my children and I can bring bigger attention to this and bring so many children home through really addressing this, and I'm not here to attack anyone. Again, this is just not working. This is horrible in our society, and it just needs to be changed. And we're actually blessed these days. I mean, you'll get this. We're actually blessed to have such people that do think like this, as well as people that have been put through this and experienced to know better ways, to be able to go to the drawing board and be able to say, look, there are amazing ways to deal with real abuse issues, to deal with, childhood trauma that's now affecting parents, that's affecting their family. Let's go to the root of these things. And instead of just removing these children, targeting children on such incentivized, means and grounds, why don't we look at, helping the parents, providing services to parents that really maintain children in the home and maintain their family unit. And, as we get into looking at CPS issues, I mean, there's even incentives to get rid of the man out of the house, or they'll tell you, oh, you can get rid of your husband and then you can get your children back. I mean, it is egregious. It's terrorizing children and parents, and it's tearing us apart. And that's our future.
It's so sad to know that this is happening. And like I said, it is so opposite of just that one brief conversation that I had with that CPS worker. And she actually said that they had it on video. She told me they had him abusing his son on video. So there was no question. Like right now, what you're saying is your parents are alleging something and the courts are believing them. They're not investigating it. They're not going to the children to find out, what's your side of the story. So right there, that tells you something is amiss. Something is different about your position. And how interesting that I ran into that person, not knowing that I was going to meet you, 8 months later. And I even kind of forgot about it, to be honest.
It's so wild, because also I got sent a clip this morning that I just posted on my Twitter of a CPS worker coming forward talking all about it. And that's what has been a big message for me. Like, people, this is systemic. Like, people go into it with, with a good purpose and a good desire to help children. But the way that the training is, the system is set up, like you said about the apathy and just the demeanor of the workers and stuff. I mean, my friends, that's another conflict of interest. I have friends that were GALs here in town, whose friends are in the system, who are my case managers now.
What's a GAL?
Guardian ad litem, which is another huge issue. Huge issue with the CPS. But they, I was speaking to my friend that was the local GAL, and who had her own abuse issue with her marriage, but that was covered. Nothing was done about the abuse going on in her relationship because she's part of the system, right? They were able to handle it privately and blah, blah, blah. So I started asking her, because I had also been approached about, we have a center here in town called the Hibiscus House, which is the foster care. My mother was actually, lent her name in the beginning for starting it and things. And again, I've never been there. This is alleged, but several employees started coming to me and to my friends saying, we believe that they're trafficking children out of there. I mean, girls are leaving and they're coming back later in the day with huge wads of money and, just different things that they had seen. So of course I asked my friend, I'm thinking this is again a good thing. Like, I've got a friend on the inside, the local guardian ad litem. Let me ask her what's going on,
Yeah, I've got connections. Let me see if I can help.
Right. And I just, like you were saying, if you want to get involved, like go find another organization or go find, it was just very apathetic. The demeanor about these cases, it was just, it's almost like a police officer after a while. I almost feel like they should have only a certain amount of time that they can work within the industry, and then they need the system. Oh, it's horrible to say industry, but in that position, and then you should have therapy through it. I mean, it's real. Absolutely. It's not saying that they should be tough. So I did find that it's very apathetic. They're like, oh, we see the worst, but then they're also made to do these removals that are absolutely not necessary. They see the trauma that's done to the kids and the family. But then, I mean, my caseworker told me that, I just try to get the cases done and completed, because the department, last time I spoke up, they told me that I was sabotaging their case and something about, insinuating, threatening her job.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, real quick, to go to the, the example that you used about the boy being given back to the father. I actually have a close friend in the movement or in the effort, Kara, and her son actually just passed away. I mean, we aren't even addressing the children that die within this system and the murder actually that goes on and the physical abuse that goes on. So, that she actually just lost her son. It was a very bad incident. The father took him to the hospital, said he had to, poop hard or whatever. And he had injury to down there, and it was horrific, and he died from it. And they believed the father. They made excuses for the father. And she has a daughter that's older who still has to now go to this man's house 50% of the time and be with him. And she talks about abuse as well. So they're ignoring the real abuse issues and giving them to the abusers. And then they're making up abuse and predicting things that you can't do in court and legally for children that they're taking that aren't in abuse situations. So
this is one big club, is what I'm finding out. We're not in it, right? As the famous George Carlin once said. We are definitely on the outside of it. I don't want to have membership to this club if it's all true, just for the record. What you said, going back to what you said about your purpose, and I literally had a cascade of those truth bumps for about 2 minutes along my whole body. When I work with clients, and I'm a life coach, so when I work with clients and we hit on something really powerful, it's such a confirmation. So I love that. But it was big. Like I haven't had a body ripple like that in a long time. And I trust that feeling, because I think it's straight from the universe, straight from spirit. So if in fact this is your purpose, and I believe that it probably is, and you're in it, you're in that deep valley right now. Do you see a way out of it? Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Do you see yourself standing on the top of that mountain someday and overlooking the beautiful view after you've climbed and artered all the way up?
I'm hopeful for that. Yes, I am hopeful. And my heart and my gut, which I teach intuition, I teach all of this and coach as well now, and do healing. But, I do intuitively see that. I do see victory. I have to say when they gave me those ridiculous papers and did all of that, it was very bizarre to me, to self-reflect, to feel victory when I should be feeling, terror, not. And it's been terrifying. I mean, every day right now we keep it together. I've been raised in this, but it's terrifying and it's traumatizing. And getting through each day at a time is a lot. I'm very fortunate for everyone. Why I see that light, I guess. I'm sorry not to beat around the bush, but why I do see that is because of the people coming forward and people like you and people in this that, the masses don't realize that there are hundreds of thousands of parents in this country fighting for their children, missing their children. I mean, I'm going to get choked up, but we have rooms where our children lived,
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Meghan. This is it's an epidemic in our country. That's okay. You're totally allowed to cry. I don't know how you couldn't cry. I think you're holding up pretty well. And I know from the information that I've gleaned over the past 2 years during this great awakening, I really believe that what we're talking about is what everything comes down to. It's about the children. It's about really bad, nefarious things that have been going on under the false narrative, under the false guise of here, let me help you, let me protect. The other foundations that are global, the CGI, all about these foundations that are designed to help children. And the fact of the matter is, and I don't know what the true number is, it's hundreds of thousands of children go missing every year in America. Where do these kids go? That's a lot of children. We hear about the one or two sensational stories, like your brother's story back then was very sensational. Everyone knows about it. But what about the other hundreds of thousands of kids that go missing? It's an inordinate amount, and people do not want to know about it, Meghan. I know that. I have people in my direct life that want to block their ears to this truth, and they're going to listen to this and probably tune you out, and they're not going to believe you. They're going to, what you're alleging about your family, they're going to side with your family because, your dad has been in the spotlight for so long and people feel like they know him because he's been on camera for so long. But there is it is, right? That's the narrative that we're talking about. But we have a problem in this country with people that are wanting to know the truth, even though it's hard. And this is the hardest thing to let in and to realize. We've been bamboozled in a lot of ways by a lot of these organizations, and the sooner that people can wake up, the better. And I feel like that's part of your purpose, though. Boy, you were given the ultimate, the torch, basically. Like I'm gonna lead this way because this is happening now to you during this great awakening. That's not a coincidence, in my opinion.
No, it's not.
It didn't happen 10 years ago where it could have been very quiet 10 years ago. I wasn't doing a podcast 10 years ago. A lot of people that you met that you've been speaking to haven't been either. So I think it's all divinely timed. So there is that little piece of, I guess, positivity.
I do. And I absolutely agree with that. And again, that's what's been able to keep me, again, like you just said, I've had my moments and it's hard. I mean, this is crazy stuff to have to deal with. But, I do keep that, and that's what keeps me going every day. This system, again, it's horrible. No one wants to have to deliver this information or stand up and say these things, and especially like you said, to most likely receive a lot of criticism for it, but, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children itself states how many children actually go missing from foster care each year, and how the majority of children that actually, I believe it's 80%, again, look it up and feel free. That's how more people get involved in this. But approximately 80% of child trafficking situation is out of the CPS system. Also, children are going missing in the system and it's not reported. And then the money is still collected on those children. People don't really realize how many children are missing within the system, how many children die within the system. This is also generational. If they can get a diagnosis, they're taking children and labeling them as schizophrenic, ADHD, all of this, when they've just been taken from their parents and their families and all of this. They're in trauma, and then they're giving them these diagnoses, putting them on medication, putting them in foster care homes where they don't know anything and what's going on. Their parents don't know where they are. And they get more money off of that. But it also creates a generational thing where they're now following, the children that age out of the system. And then when they have children, there's a great advocate that's been on YouTube for a while. His name is Hunter Callahan, and he very well describes how he was, raised in the foster care system. And when he aged out, they started going after his children and him once he started having them. So,
Wow.
and that's a label. That's not right. That is not productive for our society. That keeps people in trauma. And I think everyone sees where I'm going with that. It's just horrific.
Well, I think the time is now for the veil to be lifted. I feel like it's time for people to let this truth in, and even at least to say, well, maybe she's telling the truth. I use this a lot with clients. What if?
Mm-hmm.
What if you're telling the truth? What if what you're saying is, what if there's some truth to it? Don't we owe it to families? Don't we owe it to children? Don't we owe it to God to look into this a little bit? I don't even have children. I don't have children. I don't. And but I go to a lot of the school board meetings here and fight when I was fighting against masks when they're trying to mask the kids, and I don't have children. I don't have a stake in this game.
Well, and
I have a stake in freedom.
Yes. And that's what we need. There are parents in this fight that are fighting, and we're the only ones fighting, and we're in trauma, and we're trying to fight for our children at the same time. We really need the public and the masses, and also people in the system already, to be coming forward, to protect, to speak truth, to get to the bottom and find out the truth. We want people to do that. My story alone, please go look into Adam's records, the depositions from my own father and mother, and also my mother's in-home lover at the time, discussed their cocaine addictions, their lifestyle, everything that was going on with my parents around the time of my brother's abduction. You can go look at statistics for CPS, and even just go to Facebook, or for example, and type in, anti-corruption, CPS anti-corruption, family court corruption groups. There are infinite groups talking about this and asking for help. And we really need people that aren't in trauma. We need people like you. We need people that are in the system that are just good-hearted people and are not okay with this. I don't know how anyone could sleep at night.
I don't either. And you're right. There is so much going on behind the scenes. The way that our world is set up right now through social media, mainstream corporate media, all of that stuff, the censorship that is going on. So anyone who's going to do any research, I hope you know by now not to use Google. Google is the worst place you can go if you want to get a bunch of lies and miscommunication, misinformation. DuckDuckGo is a little bit better. Startpage is another one that's not censored, but you do have to find it. But once you do look and you start lifting up the cover of things, there is information there. But the way that this world is set up, we feel as though we're the minority because everything is run by the same deep state, right? The same cabal, the same club that we're talking about. So when we don't see it right in front of us, we're not presented that narrative. When we are presented with the truth, we don't recognize it as that. And we say, wait a minute, that doesn't match what they've been showing me on media and social media, so it can't be true.
Yeah, the wonderful notion of cognitive dissonance, right? And they've
100%.
used that beautifully. So that's absolutely true. And I think that, again, on a bigger picture for humanity, I hope that we can learn that we should start looking into things and questioning that. I think that's going to be a big service in our benefit if we can start doing that and just that's a great feeling. That takes a lot of pressure off too. You have the power. You can make your own decisions. We can come together as collectives and have great discussions and, see different perspectives, and different points of view. And that's what I've found in the CPS groups and really coming together with advocates and activists across the country. It's been absolutely amazing. And the stuff that we want to do with legislation and things coming up, we really need people to get involved. We're talking about a weekly podcast as well to really hear grievances and give a space for people within the system and the workers and judges and all that to really come forward. You don't have to say who you are if you don't want to, but we really need to be getting these reality realities out, and people to, it's a shame, like you were saying, people on the outside that have never had to deal with this. The easy response is, oh, well, if they got their children taken away, then they must have done something that, warrants that. So we're good. We're moving on to our lunch now, and it's like, that sadly, horrifically, that's so far from the truth. It's not even funny. And now at this point, people don't have an excuse. With all due respect, I just say people don't have an excuse anymore to say that. It's out too much, and that's a big thing. Sorry, real quick, is what I wanted to make sure I said about finding the information. I mean, we went to the National Center for Missing Exploited Children's website, and on there was their own self-audit for 2019, which, since we have started talking about it, they have since taken down and removed. But it is a self-audit from 2019 showing how the center gets approximately $38 million a year of our taxpayer money as a 501c3. It's presented in narrative as a government agency.
It's like a church donation.
And then they also receive $18 million a year from private corporate donations. And when you look at the companies that they're accepting donations from, it is in the trafficking and child, exploitation and stuff world. They are nefarious for being questioned, if you will, for, partaking or covering, like Facebook, Airbnb, TikTok, even L Brands connected to Richard Branson, which then you look to the sister organization, which is ICMEC. That's the international sister branch to the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, which on their board is Richard Branson, all of these nefarious characters. We also have, who helped start the National Center, is Ernie Allen, who there was big issues with that, and how much, each of these executives are paying themselves out and their buddies each year from those federal fund or taxpayer funds. The National Center is essentially a database. It's not in, that $38 million could be going to local efforts that can actually address,
make a difference.
Exploitations, missing children in that timely fashion that we need, the 48 hours, the 24 hours to really look for this. So we see that happening, as well as lobbying. I mean, people really need to look into the not so obvious mainstream, hypey stuff. They need to really look into lobbying, how legislation is handled, how money is distributed to lobbyists, and different things. My dad was very bipartisan for a long time in Capitol Hill, because that's how you can, get what you
get paid in both pockets. Yeah.
Yeah.
I lived in DC for a couple of years. It was awful. I've lived in a lot of places, and I know now why it was so, because I'm so empathic and so
it's just gray.
When I was there, I was so miserable, Megan. I was drinking a lot of wine, more than I ever have. And I finally left, and I moved here to Naples, and it was like, my happiness level went off the charts going from DC to here. But now, like anything, when you gain some distance and clarity, you can look back and go, oh, no wonder it's such a corrupt town, and it's so gross, and it's so opposite of who I am. So, and I couldn't function there. So I just stayed in my nice little place, and I would drink wine because it made me happy. So I hear you. All of this stuff that you're saying, I 100% agree with, in terms of we need to know, people need to know. And right now, as we speak, there is a massive trial going on that, hardly anyone is talking about. And it comes down to the crux of everything. This Ghislaine Maxwell trial is happening as we speak, and it all relates to child trafficking, and it relates to Epstein, and who is his guy out in Ohio who owns Victoria's Secrets? He's part of the L brand too, isn't he?
Les Wexner.
I mean, and that was a big labyrinth. That was a big thing.
That was a big thing that I brought up that really kind of, I think, tipped the scales into taking my children, and we need to do this, was actually, you brought it up. I started researching again, and I remember, I started being asked about Laura Silsby and Haiti and the 33 children that she was caught and accused of trying to kidnap out, because they were not orphans. They had families. And here comes Hillary down to, get her out of it. And then she goes,
save the kids.
and works right, and then she goes and comes back and works for Alert Sense, which is connected to Amber Alert, which that's another show. These are topics for another show that we go into, how they are not what they say they are, and how they are used for different things, and specifically trafficking. And so, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second.
What we were just talking about was connecting all the dots, the labyrinth. One
Right.
person leads to the next. Lex
Right.
Wessner, Epstein, the trial.
I started saying to myself, I said, wait, I remember my dad and my brother bragging and all this stuff about how they were going to Haiti after the earthquake for humanitarian efforts. And I start looking into it. Now, since you can't find any pictures of them there in Haiti, you can't, that's all scrubbed. But I did, of course, they love to out themselves. Hank Asher is another player in this. And he is the creator of LexisNexis search engine. He created the Matrix database. So he's really this insider for the databases, the federalized policing, facial recognition, these kinds of things. And he brags in the Huffington Post self-published articles, several of them, how my father, my brother, himself, and his son-in-law were taking private planes over from South Florida to Port-au-Prince in 2010, working with med tents. And then we have a big case in Miami around that time of children being medevaced out of Haiti and brought over here. And there was a big thing, it's leaving my mind the names right now, but huge case of judges in Miami being in collusion, dealing with that and handling that. So, we have these, again, I was not there, but, these things need to be looked into. And it's a narrative that's given to us that, really sways how we think and what we question a lot of the time.
There's a lot of information out there about Haiti and the CGI, and they're like, there's so much. It's almost like if you're in a position right now where you're saying none of this is true, then you're part of the problem. That's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're denying that things are happening that are nefarious with children and people are not who they say they are, then shame on you. It's time to wake up and change. And it's time to not just wake up. I think it's time to take action.
Take action.
The waking up is not enough. We need to start taking action in some way, shape, or form. So this is fascinating. I feel like we need to talk again. There's so much to talk about, and I want to track your progress. And I commend you for what you're going through. I think you're brave. I don't know anything about your dad. I don't know the things you allege. Maybe not. I don't know. I'll do some research. It's not really important what I think. I think it's important to get the word out there. I believe what you're saying and feeling. I believe your truth coming from your narrative and your perspective. It feels true. And I appreciate that. I don't think I would have had you on Sacred Valley if I didn't think that you were coming from in a true, honest place in your heart, for sure.
Thank you.
I wish the best for your kids. And, but if your soul really did choose this, and I believe that you did, God's got you, and something good is going to come of this. So hopefully along the way, you can help as many people as you can. And if there's anything that I can do to help at all, please just let me know. I mean, I'm a small little dot right now in the world of social media. I'm hoping to get a little bit bigger, but as you said here's her Twitter handle, Meghan Walsh _. That's the best way to get in touch with you. And I hope that you come back onto Sacred Valley again, Meghan.
Thank you so much, Tara. I mean, we really need the voices of the people, and we need the people to act with us. This is an amazing opportunity for us to come together and really address something that could ultimately be so positive and amazing. So I really can't thank you enough for people, just to get this out there. I really would like people to research. I would love for people to start talking about it. And we need you guys. We need the masses to change this. And we really can do it. We can bring home a lot of children, you guys.
It's going to happen. The Great Awakening is upon us. The beast is waking up. It's just taking a little longer than I would prefer, because I've been awake for a long time.
Me too. Amen.
Like holding the line, like, okay, everybody.
That's our own lesson in patience, I guess, for us to learn, right?
I'm an Aries. We don't have patience.
I hear you.
Thanks again, Meghan. Really great to see you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope that you like this video down below. Please share this. If there's any video at all that you're going to share, this would be the one. Get this subject out there. Start talking with people about it. Start doing some research. Reach out to me. You can reach me. All my information and contact is below. Reach out to Meghan. And in the meantime, Meghan, I'll pray for you, and good
Thank
luck.
you.
And I will talk to you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. God bless.